Hello everyone. A couple of years ago, in one of the first Minecraft videos on the C2 channel, I showed off a design for a creeper-based blast chamber. Now, that was a Minecraft 1.12. Most of the mechanics that made that work either don't work anymore or are severely outdated, and there isn't even any commentary on the video, nor is there a world download. So, I decided to redo the entire thing in Minecraft 1.20. Now, why would you even want a creeper-based blast chamber to begin with? Why not just use a TNT-based blast chamber? Well, really, mainly just for the novelty, but also because this does not require any TNT tubing, a mechanic that at this point in time is quite dubious as to how long it's gonna remain in the game for. Mojang could basically decide to axe that at any given point in time, and well, let's face it, the alternative is to just craft up TNT and collect up sand, which is not really a particularly fun job in Minecraft to do. So I've tried to actually make some kind of fully functioning 18,000 items an hour blast chamber with a 4 game tick input work using creepers. Now, one of the fundamental reasons why this hasn't really been attempted as of so far, or why it's kind of pointless, is because so far there wasn't really a way to get creepers to actually drop all of the blocks that they detonate. If anyone remembers, back in Minecraft 1.15, Mojang changed TNT so it actually drops all of the blocks as items that it actually blows up. But they didn't change creepers. Creeper explosions still sometimes destroy the items that they effectively make in the explosion. Now, why am I making this video then? Well, because this has changed fairly recently. They have now added a game rule that is sadly set to true by default, called mob explosion drop decay to the game now. If this is set to true, like it is by default, a creeper interacts exactly like I just said and will destroy some of the blocks it detonates. However, if you set this game rule to false, a creeper explosion is now going to work exactly like a TNT explosion, making this entire concept actually viable, as you're now capable of using creeper explosions for block converters, for example, in your TNT blast chambers. Now, making the blast chamber still wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, mainly because of the mechanism that I used to actually remotely detonate the creepers, because obviously I need some kind of non-player input way to effectively get a creeper to explode on command mid-air somewhere with very precise timings and in a very precise position. And so far, and this is very similar to how it worked in the last blast chamber, I used a skeleton. Let me actually get those in there. The block here would effectively retract, opening up line of sight with the skeleton, and the skeleton would then shoot the creeper, which would make the creeper angry, and after its usual fuse, it would explode and kill the creeper, kill the skeleton. Now obviously we don't want this to happen in the chamber here, that would be counterproductive, so I now use a calibrated scope sensor, which has also changed from the last version, where I used a string with an observer to detect when the creeper takes damage, to then shove him out the chamber here and drop him right in between where I want the blocks to blow up. So right here, the explosion would effectively happen. And this happens at a precise enough timing and a precise enough position that you can use the trick of moving a block into an explosion, so it turns into block 36 and has a blast resistance of 0 to blow up way more blocks with a single explosion than you would normally be able to. Now, because nobody has ever actually made a blast chamber that is specifically suited for creepers that actually works at a full 4 game tick input, I had to do that myself. And boy, let me tell you, I am not good enough at redstone to be able to do this. The keen-eyed among you might have already noticed, this is two-parted, just copied over once. That's because I could only make one of them work at 8 game ticks. So I just strung 2 of them together and have a separator here that turns a 4 game tick input into an 8 game tick input on both sides. And it's then further split into these 2 sides that effectively alternate pushing the blocks down between one another. The disadvantage of this is that I need quite a lot of explosions to get the 18,000 items an hour that I actually want, but because I'm not using a block of TNT here that I would have to craft, and I'm not dupling anything, I'm just waiting for the creepers to spawn, this isn't actually that much of a problem. It really only comes down to how fast your mob farm is capable of spawning the creepers and the skeletons, which turns out is a bigger problem than I thought it was going to be. This entire system back here is just there to separate out the creepers and the skeletons from the zombies and the witches and the spiders, which was a significantly more complicated undertaking than I thought it was going to be. Which is why, later in this video, I'm going to show off a couple of things that do not require a skeleton, so you can build a creeper only farm instead of having to build a general hostile mob farm here. Now, I did attempt to make a single explosion blast chamber that works at 18,000 items an hour and works with a creeper. That prototype can be seen over there, but for reasons I'm going to get to later, that didn't work. So, let me actually turn this thing on so you can see it in action. Is there entities where they are supposed to be entities? Right, despawn radius. Probably a good time to talk about this. You have to basically stand in this exact same spot here if you want to make 100% sure that none of your mobs are going to disappear on you. Mobs that are not name tagged or sit in a minecart in some kind of way will despawn if they are outside of 30 blocks around the player. If they're within 30 blocks of the player, they will not despawn, which is what we're taking advantage of here, because the mobs that you can see in the chamber there, these two, and on the other side of course as well, those would despawn if I was too far away. And if a single component of this is missing, obviously the blast chamber doesn't get an explosion, and it really doesn't like that. It just breaks, gets clogged up and dies at some point. So you need to stay here to effectively ensure that none of the components of this blast chamber just despawn on you. Anyways, I've just verified that entire thing. This all works now, which means I can go ahead and I'm using a command block here to input the blocks. Obviously, you're entirely capable of just standing here and placing the blocks manually, but for the sake of this showcase, here we go. I will fly around and risk something despawning now for the sake of the video, but I really wouldn't recommend it. Oh, there you go. I was already the first explosion and the second explosion. They are basically timed to go right after one another because of the way they work. Yeah, as you can tell, it cycles once, then it switches over to the other side, triggers the explosion. There's a certain randomness as to when exactly the explosion is going to happen after it gets signaled, which is why the traditional way of blast chambers buffering up the blocks to wait for the explosion don't really work. There's a sort of variable amount of time in how long it takes, which is why I'm using this approach of just switching over to a second side instead of continuously filling up some kind of buffer on this side. And that has worked fairly well for me as of so far. I hope I'm within 30 blocks here. I think I should be. Yeah, but as you can tell, 18,000 items an hour. Of course, right now this works as a cobblestone farm, but technically speaking, you can run this with concrete that you place down to convert concrete. You can run this as a basalt farm. You can run this as a dirt generator with a dirt farm attached to it somewhere. I'm pretty sure you might also be able to run this with a tree farm attached to it somewhere. But obviously always keep in mind that your tree farm had to be somehow close enough that you're always within 30 blocks of all of the mobs so they don't despawn on you. What else have I forgotten to talk about? Right. This mob farm over here, separating out all of the mobs was a significantly bigger pain than I thought it was going to be. All of the spiders just disappear into this gap here. The zombies can also disappear into this gap, which is incredibly nice. Get rid of them very quickly, but it doesn't get rid of all of them, which means there's also this horrendous pink mess of a zombie and skeleton separator over here that works just so barely. So after seeing all of this, I really wanted to get rid of all of it. So I browsed through YouTube to see what other people have been able to come up with in this sort of field, and I find a video that I was actually mentioned in, or that the video I made on this last was actually mentioned in, by the Mooning Cow Milk here, that showed off using a witch instead of a creeper, instead of a skeleton to aggro the creeper. That is then something I attempted over here. The basic principle is that I have a witch that gets aggroed by a snow golem. You give it a second here. It will then start to throw potions. If you position the witch right, it will only throw harming potions. And if this harming potion harms the creeper, it will get angry at the witch and basically do the exact same thing that the skeleton does. But the witch has another advantage. It doesn't die in the explosion, and it heals itself using potions if it takes damage, which means you can use the same witch that you name tag and effectively infinitely cycle it for explosions. Let me just end the misery here and delete some of these entities. You can then basically, if the potions are in the bubble column, you can place a block above them and they will just pop. So let me get a witch down here. The witch gets put in front of the snow golem here. I need some creepers as a charge, obviously. Now, because the witch is incredibly inaccurate with his potions, and this really ended up being the reason why I used the skeletons instead of the creepers in the actual design, because it's more reliable to get the skeleton to actually aggro the creeper properly. The problem with the witch kind of is there's too many variables in the entire thing. There's a sort of randomness in how long it takes the witch to actually get aggroed by the snow golem. I'm pretty sure with the way this works, there's a way for the witch to actually kill the snow golem as well, which wouldn't be good. And because the witch has such a, terrible aim really, you can already hear some of the potions pop when they're not supposed to. So I'm using like a counter here to just make the witch throw 3 potions instead of just 1 before getting her to trigger the explosion, so that I can rely on the entire thing being somewhat accurate. But this is still going to fail like 100 out of one time out of like 150 or so. This is probably going to fail, which obviously we don't want, because the chamber really doesn't like an explosion not triggering when it's supposed to. There's a sort of randomness in the entire thing, which is why I didn't actually go with the witch system for now. But as you can tell over here already, I have attempted to make this more reliable, just haven't found a particularly good way to tame the witch potion to a point where it actually goes where I want it to 100% of the time. As you can tell, that one for example just fell down here and disappeared, even with all of these bubble columns and water streams. So if somebody can find a way to get this witch to reliably throw a potion at a very particular block somewhere, this could be the better way of doing this, because you don't need the entire mob sorter anymore. You could just use the witch and a creeper only farm. Now, earlier in the video you might have heard me mention that that entire project over there basically failed and didn't work. Now there's a reason for this. Turns out this entire mechanic, especially with the creepers and the skeletons, I've tested this extensively. About 1 out of every 200 odd creepers or so will detonate maybe 3 ticks or so after it is actually supposed to detonate, meaning it doesn't actually destroy the blocks in the explosion. Now with the way I set up this particular chamber here, the slower version, this is quite difficult to break, in a sense that this will easily take that very low likelihood happening 2 times in a row and not break in the process. But if it were to ever happen 3 times in a row, there would be straggler blocks at the bottom here, and the entire system would effectively not like you very much anymore. That's ended up being the thing that broke that chamber over there, where every once in a while the creeper just wouldn't detonate properly, and the blocks would just build up way too much, and the chamber would get clogged and break. Now, if anyone can actually figure out as to why the creeper is just being annoying and random, I would really like to know, because if that entire issue could be fixed, this could really actually be used as a proper alternative to regular blast chambers. Is there anything I have forgotten about? Probably, yes. Need to give credit where credit's due. I have no idea how to make block conveyors. So all of the block conveyor shenanigans with the 0-tick pistons and whatnot you can see in the video were made by Blockerinsky. He has a very great YouTube channel and a really great video that basically shows the basics of how to do 4 game tick block streams, which really helped me make this entire thing. But yeah, beyond that point, I hope somebody significantly smarter than me is capable of turning this into an actually functioning system. And besides that, I'm going to leave a world download somewhere in the description. I hope you enjoyed this, and see you next time. Bye bye.